Welcome back to Harmonious Workplaces. Together, we'll discuss leadership in times of calm and crisis. What crucial action can change leaders take during a crisis situation within an organization? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. As always, we're glad to see you today. I'm Rich Cruz, and I'm joined by my colleague, Cheryl Volpe.
Hi, Rich.
Hey,
Hi,
Cheryl.
everyone. Hey, Ben.
And Ben Kleinman.
Hey, everyone.
And so the last few weeks, we've been talking about leadership. And so let's keep the discussion going. Today, we're going to be talking about, so there are these times where things are going great and we're nice and calm and, everything's, whether it's smooth or not, it's calm, right? Calm seas. And then we have the crisis, right? We have the storm, and we need leadership in both of these situations. The last time we talked about some of the different types of leadership going on this continuum from laissez-faire to transformational, and everything in between. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about calm and crisis. What do we think?
Yeah. And I'm curious to dig in because I feel like sometimes there's principles that hold true at all times, and then other times you need a leader to be someone who is different in one situation versus another. So I'm really curious to see where you guys have seen this go, how it's worked well.
Sure.
And we have touched in the past about how a crisis, speaking about that other side of a person, Ben, can bring out those resiliency skills that some people don't even know that are there until they are confronted with that unexpected situation. That is fascinating.
For sure.
Cool. Where do you guys want to start? Do you want to start with calm or with crisis?
Well, I'm going to throw a wrinkle that we didn't talk about.
Let's do.
Into this. Okay, so just to illustrate some things. So last week we didn't have Cheryl here because Cheryl was out looking at horseshoe crabs.
It is
right?
true.
And we have another arthropod thing going on here in the Chicagoland where we are just inundated with cicadas everywhere.
Oh.
So we have these, what I would say, we have this very calm kind of situation with the horseshoe crabs. And maybe I'm wrong, but they seem to be pretty docile things,
Super quiet.
Right? And then we have...
Super quiet.
Super quiet, right? And now here we have people in crisis mode with the super loud, cicadas that are going on here. I think this kind of there's two things to talk about here, right? On the calm side, we've got the calm seas, kind of the navigator using kind of going with the horseshoe crab situation. We're a sailor or a captain on a ship, right? And calm seas, right? And we have all these kind of chill things happening, right? And then on the other side, we've got the storm. We've got the same captain has to lead us through the storm, and the swirling.
Would that be cicada gate, or is it cicada-geddon?
Cicada-geddon.
All right.
So, what have you seen in times of calm that have worked for you? in your organization, whether it's through a change situation or whether it's just operations, what have you seen that has worked in terms of leadership?
It's an excellent metaphor, Rich, because in my experience, when there are periods of calm, we try to create. And this is what the horseshoe crabs were doing. Right? They were creating their
Oh,
next
yeah.
generation. So during those times, I have experienced a desire to innovate, improve. That's a company that is not leaning towards the complacency, which can also happen. And things can become almost too easy, too quiet. There is no innovation, there is no improvement, which can in itself cause the crisis without proper leadership to keep things moving forward. Right.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
ideally, this is a time to gather your forces, assess what worked last season, last year, last quarter, take the opportunity in that calm to plan improvements or to get better without the pressure.
I really like that.
Yeah.
That's really cool, and it ties into some of the themes that we've talked about many times over, where you need a leader who can recognize that this stretch of calm is an opportunity. It won't necessarily last forever, and let's be thoughtful about how we take advantage of that. What are some things that I can intentionally do to tell my people, to let my organization know that now is a good time to start thinking about innovation, to start going back and looking at what worked well, what opportunities maybe do we see coming, or what did we have on the back burner that we maybe didn't prioritize before? What can we advance forward? Or just how can we make this organization better internally without necessarily doing anything external? What can we do to improve that psychological safety, or what we called it psychological beanbag or safety beanbag in prior episodes? What can we do to make that a bigger, fuller, stuffier, softer beanbag, right? So it's those kinds of things. I really like that. But that takes a certain type of leader. Like, what are some of those qualities that you've seen in those times of calm? What are some of those qualities that you've seen that those leaders show or bring to the fore?
Sure.
Well, I think for me, when it gets too calm, I'm going to say, right? And you're right. It's a time for creation. It's a time for reassessment. It's a time for reflection and to figure out what can we do to grow. Right. I think that there's this thing that maybe I've had this drilled into me with all the coaches that I've ever had, but when you're out of your comfort zone, you're growing, right? So when you can take people out of their comfort zone and challenge them to do something more, so you're kind of adding in a little maybe controlled crisis into there. There's stress, and stress can be distress, right, which is bad stress, and then eustress, which is helpful stress, right? So if you can bring, as a leader, if you can bring that eustress in by creating some challenging goals, I've found that that doing some workshops with setting goals, short term, long term, can break the complacency cycle and can achieve some of those objectives of moving things forward.
Is that part of the growth that Cheryl was talking about? Taking this as an opportunity to grow internally, where you introduce a little bit of structured stress or structured, I don't want to call it structured chaos, but structured stress maybe, or structured growth opportunities, where you sort of encourage people to get out of their comfort zone, to try something a little bit different, to know that if it goes wrong, that the rest of the organization is very stable right now, so they can do a little bit off on the side and not worry about disrupting core business processes or what have you.
Yeah. That's exactly it. I mean, we always. I don't think there's a business owner out there, right? So I'm going to take the side of the of the business owner on this, right? Where I don't think there's a point where they just want status quo. They want to see growth, and for a couple of reasons, right? They want more revenue, they want reduced risk, and they want more time in their business, right? And that's where the people come in, right? So I think that taking these opportunities for growth when things are leveled off, I think that's where you have to add a little of that eustress in there.
Right. And I'm sure you both touched on it last week when we were talking about different leadership styles, from the transactional laissez-faire to the transformational, right? Even a laissez-faire type or transactional type of leader can still prevent complacency, giving new challenges to those super achievers who don't need monitoring all the time or can function independently. Even those folks should be given opportunities for some of that discomfort just to keep their skills sharp, especially in today's economy. I mean, the whole upskilling thing, if you're not understanding what that means, and if you're not keeping up in times of calm with learning new things, your company could stagnate. And that's not what a business owner, to your point, Rich, clearly would want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. So we've started off this whole episode talking about leadership styles and the idea of being a type of leader in the situation where it's relatively calm, relatively stable, relatively horseshoe crab. And we've talked about leadership in the time of crisis or Cicadageddon and how that might need a different type of leadership. We'll get into that part in the next segment. One of the things that we've talked about, or some of the things we've talked about in that time of calm where we've been focused mostly so far, is this idea that it's a really good opportunity to step back and allow and intentionally provide that opportunity for your team, your organization, to reassess, to focus on innovation, to focus on growth. Could be personal growth, could be organizational growth, could be team growth. Give people that opportunity, and if they're not taking it, maybe introduce just a little bit of that stress so that they can get out of their comfort zone and let them know that this is their time to do that while the rest of the organization is very stable.
For Fortune 100 companies and small businesses alike, Harborside Strategy helps design and implement customized precision change management initiatives. From new organizational structures to new processes to new systems, we help you clarify the reason and urgency around your change in language that will resonate across your organization. With that clarity and a common purpose, we use the power of stories and blended communication methods to reinforce your goals and keep everyone focused and aligned. All of it tailored to your people, your organization, your needs. Contact Principal Ben Kleinman today to learn more at www.harborsidestrategy.com. Again, that is www.harborsidestrategy.com. Okay. I was once working for a company where I was an internal consultant for them, and what we did was when we were at there were peaks and valleys in our sales cycle, right? So when we were in that lull, which was in the earlier, like the first quarter, right? We really took that time to do. There was personal development, and then there was team development that we did during that time. So it doesn't have to be like cyclical like that, but that in that case, we were very intentional about when we did that type of stuff.
And that was something that, Rich, was part of the culture that was driven by leadership.
That was, yeah.
Cool.
That was actually I found that to be a pretty refreshing part of how that organization was structured.
Nice.
Right.
Nice.
And for us at Mystery Science Theater, we were between seasons when we developed the comic book series.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you go.
Period of relative calm. So.
Oh man, I had the comic book right here for like 2 weeks, and if I had known, I would have had it and shown it.
So that's one of the more memorable things that came out of that period of calm. How about you, Ben?
We'll put that in the show notes, a link to the.
There you go. I will.
That's great.
The Cheryl comic book.
Did you have an experience, Ben, of similar nature where you were between high energy crisis periods where something innovative came out of it that you can recall?
I think it's varied by company and by industry, and it seems like the better companies that are more focused on that will take the opportunity to look at it like we've talked about and say, okay, we've just finished X, or we just came out of this massive transformation, or we just, went through a period of lots of disruption. Maybe it wasn't crisis, but it was some sort of organizational transformation. And they said, let's look at being a little bit intentional about not introducing another change right away. Let's look at this group. Let's just give them a little bit of steady state and do some continuous improvement. And they bake in that sort of continuous improvement, refinement time before they layer on a whole new massive change. Assuming there's no disruption in the industry, they layer on that kind of, let's just give a little bit of breathing space so people can get back to their, normal, if you will. And then we can kind of put them back in the, okay, you're ready for the next spin up type of thing where we do something very different for your group.
Right. And that's neat. You work with so many different companies, but those companies who take advantage of that stand out in your mind as superior, more successful. Yeah. Right.
Cool. Let's dig into some crisis. And we've kind of talked a little bit about crisis before, but in terms of leadership, I don't think we've talked as much about leadership styles. And Rich, you gave a nice summary of what we talked about last episode. Maybe we could think about types of leadership for crisis modes, or modes where maybe it's not and I think of crisis maybe as an external crisis or an existential crisis, but maybe where there's some big churn or lots of things going on, lots of swirl within the organization that causes people to be distracted from their day-to-day or pulls people away from their regular business process type of stuff. What are some of the leadership styles that you've seen work really well in times of crisis, churn, chaos?
Yeah, well, one thing I can tell you is that sometimes we know what the crisis is, or where the conflict comes from, right? Sometimes that's pretty obvious, and people are talking about it and all that. And then there are times where it's felt, but nobody really kind of fully understands what is going on there. So sometimes some data collection really helps, and that could be, sometimes a pulse survey throughout the, certain sectors of the organization can help to kind of quantify what is going on here, what's happening. In fact, there was a 2020 edition of Organizational Development Review that talks about that, right? To do a pulse survey, particularly through some event of organizational change, to figure out what is exactly causing conflict or crisis, that could be inhibiting resistance. So I think that's the first thing is assess, right, what's going on here, and so we can deal with that.
Right. And that survey data is, again, dependent on that psychological safety. This is an anonymous survey. How do you really feel about these things? And, there's often a distrust around that anonymity, and people aren't able to speak their minds. But in the ideal situation where everyone says, well, yeah, there is something very unsettling happening here that we suspect there's a shifting sands, something that's just beyond our knowing. Maybe the communication could be clearer, and leadership can take some valuable data from an honest pulse check like that. It's a really good point.
Sure.
Are you struggling with high employee turnover,
low morale, or poor communication within your team? Do you find it challenging to foster collaboration and trust among your employees? Do you have resistance to some of the recent changes you've made in your business? You're not alone. According to sources such as Forbes and the Society for Human Resources Management, many business owners face these same challenges. They know that success comes from a strong workplace culture, but they don't always know where to start. If this sounds like you, it's time to take action. Our experienced consultants stand ready to work with you to develop customized solutions. Don't wait any longer. Take our quick culture scorecard today and discover where you can improve. Work Balance Consulting, where workplace culture meets success. Visit our website at www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard and start your journey toward a better workplace today. Again, visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard.
So, in terms of some of the things that we've thought about for leadership or leader styles in time of calm, it's a little bit of that thoughtfulness. It's a little bit of that reassurance, giving people the space to innovate, the space to grow, the space to reassess and think about improving. Or Cheryl, you talked about that creativity, giving that room for creativity to breathe and come to life. Are there different leadership styles that we would want to see in times of crisis then?
Well, I'm going to go back to, because I think actually innovation and creativity can even stem from the crisis situation. Cicada-geddon, just like those horseshoe crabs, it's about a bunch of organisms getting together to, make another generation. So, so there is something to be said for the swirl happening where innovation can come from that and creativity can come from that, and when a leader can absorb that information, absorb that data, and make sense of it, and use that at that level 5 level, right, where they're humble and yet they're in it to win it, right? I think when they can take all of that information and be, how do I put this, objective and empathetic at the same time, which is a tough thing to do, right? But I think that when they can do that and they can elicit that feedback and get all the diverse points of view, and then help the organization to prioritize that, there's some really great things that come out of that. I mean, and we saw that during COVID. There was so many different things that have stemmed out of that situation. How we communicate with each other. I mean, Zoom conferences and podcasts and things like this that we're doing right now, are commonplace. Whether they weren't that common before that, right? And we found value in doing this kind of stuff.
Do you think that there's a different style of communication that a leader would need in calm versus crisis, or do you think there's a different sense of pace in times of crisis? Do you feel like there's a need to do something more rapidly?
It's a great question.
Well, that's a great question.
Right.
What do you think, Ben? Throw that back at you.
I do. I think that in times of crisis, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show, it's very helpful to have someone who can be the voice of the organization, the voice of authority. And it doesn't necessarily mean authority in a sort of penal colony way. It means authority in terms of, here's what's going on, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's how we're going to communicate with you, here's how we're going to communicate with you across different channels, here's what pace we're going to give you updates, or we'll update you as new information emerges, things like that. It seems like it works well when there's one voice, and it could be a team behind that voice, but it seems like it's very helpful to have one kind of voice or figurehead that people can look to and rally around, as opposed to maybe in times of calm, it's okay to sort of have lots of things going on and maybe things are boiling at different times, and maybe different voices are louder at different times. But in times of true crisis or really heavy churn within an organization, it's helpful to have one person that's just sort of saying, look, this is what we're doing. This is our main focus right now. Here's the main priority. Everything else you're doing, if it's not in service of this, consider backburnering for now. And it's really helpful to do that, and to just be a little bit more direct, a little bit more authoritative. Still, like you say, be empathetic, still look for opinions, solicit new opinions, solicit maybe disconfirming information is one way I've heard it called. But to really be that person or that group, that team that says, here's what's going on. We're the authority. We're going to make sure that everyone knows what they need to know, and that we're on some sort of schedule to get us back to a little bit more steady state, a little bit more calm. We're going to get through this crisis together. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to update you. Here's how we're all going to move forward and make this a little bit smoother.
Sure.
And I found that there's a different tone, a different pace, a different style of leader that does that in a way that's better than maybe in times of calm. It could be the same person, but it's just flexing different muscles.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. And we tell stories to assemble a meeting, and everybody will be telling their own story about what is happening in a crisis. So that unified authority voice that can be trusted and consistent and transparent is key to keep everyone on the same page, as you were saying, Ben. Otherwise there's back channeling. There's all sorts of damaging behaviors that can emerge from people guessing or expecting the worst or projecting what they think might be happening. So that voice is really important. And there's also an external urgency, internal and external urgency to communication during a crisis, which is different than during times of calm. And that you've got, there's a reputation, an external reputation and an internal reputation to protect during times of crises. So that is a difference in how communication happens between the urgency of a crisis and the relative calm of a non-crisis period.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's maybe heightened awareness, so you have to be a little bit more cautious or a little bit more proactive maybe about protecting your reputation, about protecting your organization and the optics of what's going on. I think that's a really great point, Cheryl.
Right.
Yeah. So if I can use my never-ending mixed metaphors here, but to go back to the nautical part of it, being a beacon of stability and clear communication, kind of being the lighthouse, so to speak, in that fog, right, where people can focus on that person as being the source of stability, the place where we're going to get all the communication centralized, right, and that just helps to quell the panic that people feel. It focuses their energy towards, what that person's saying, and then people, just builds their confidence and trust, in what's happening.
Right. And not to take your metaphor into a tortured area, but I will say that the horseshoe crabs, they need the full moon to be triggered into this, 500 million year old tradition that they have of coming onto the shore to do what they have to do. It only happens during the full moon. So that beacon is very real and very literal. Right.
Right.
It's relatively more calm, what I experience, versus the cicadas, relatively calm. But for the horseshoe crabs, it's a fairly high stress situation, I'm sure, for them too. Sometimes they come out and they're flipped over and they can't get flipped back over until the next wave comes. And, and the next day, you see a little bit of
the aftermath.
See a little aftermath the next day. Like not everybody makes it back in, so.
Sure.
But the moon,
sure.
That voice, the beacon is vital.
I like that. I think that maybe is a nice metaphor for times of calm being that navigator and times of crisis being more of the beacon.
That's a great way
those are two nice metaphors, yeah. So as we think about wrapping up this show, it seems like in terms of different leadership styles, we started off talking about times of calm and coming to that metaphor of being the navigator, allowing your team that space to reassess, to be creative, to innovate, giving maybe a little bit of proactive, thoughtful stress to get people out of their comfort zone and grow intentionally. And then in times of crisis, thinking about leaders as being that beacon, that central point of where we're going to focus our attention, and giving people the sense that there is a place we're going to and we're going to get there, and here's how, and we're going to have a slightly different communication style and a communication rhythm, and this is everything we're going to focus on, and we're going to guide you through this whole thing. So I like that. That's two nice ways of thinking about the two different calms.
Yeah.
That's good.
And it's not to say that, like during that crisis part, like there's still kind of, in my opinion, there still needs to be some degree of stress there to get through it, right? Just to have the energy to get through something. So we don't want to downplay that there's something serious going on here, but we need to focus the energy and make it more positive, to get through.
Yeah, I like that. It's a different way of focusing energy.
Right.
Maybe instead of a broader, mushier focus, it's a very targeted, laser-like focus, beacon-like focus.
Beacon-like focus.
Yeah.
Not mushy.
Not flickering.
Right.
Right.
So is there, in prior times, we've often said that there is maybe one thing people can do to achieve success in times of calm, or one thing people can do in times of crisis. Is there one thing that we would want to have people hang their hat on in either calm or crisis?
I would.
One thing in each of those, or one thing in both of those?
If you can do one thing in both, wow.
I think
I don't know.
There's one thing that I'm thinking of that if it's missing, nothing happens in either case. And it is communication. It's communication. We always come back to that crisp and crystal clear, consistent communication. Without it, you can't innovate without a direction, and you can't problem solve without.
All right. I like
That's
it.
right. Yeah.
Cheryl, you've done it. You've got the wow. You brought the wow to the show.
Ta-da. I communicated.
Hey.
Crisply.
Cool. Right.
And thoughtfully. And with intention.
Wow. Thank you.
And authoritatively.
And that works for all.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, this was fun. I had a good time learning from you both today.
Always.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks a million. Awesome. Well, I hope our listeners enjoyed this episode. Tune in next time. We will continue our discussion about all things having to do with making a harmonious workplace. Find us at your favorite streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Podbean, and yada, yada, yada. It's all over. Check the show notes for more information. And with that, we will see you all next time on Harmonious Workplaces.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.